And lo, the beast looked upon the face of Beauty, and Beauty stayed his hand, and from that day forward, he was as one dead.
One of the most iconic images in cinematic history, Mr. Mash, is the giant ape climbing a tall structure with a beautiful woman in his hands.
Yes.
There are cartoon shows that make fun of that image, aimed at kids that have never seen King Kong. It's ingrained so much in the culture that we just immediately know what that is.
As a kid, I always knew that they were referencing King Kong.
Me too.
I guess we weren't the average kid.
I didn't see the first King Kong movie, not until years afterwards. It's interesting when a movie has that much of an effect on the culture, isn't it?
Yeah.
King Kong is back on theater screens for the first time in about a decade.
Yes, in Kong. Skull Island.
Yeah.
So Skull Island, Kong.
When the movie was first announced, they were just going to call it Skull Island, but they added Kong in there. I guess they wanted to make sure people knew this was a King Kong movie, because the giant ape on the poster wouldn't clue them in.
Well, right.
Yeah, so we're talking about King Kong today, which is one of those classic horror series that we haven't gotten to yet, assuming you consider King Kong horror.
It's more romance than horror.
Go back and watch that first movie. King Kong is killing people, he's eating people, he's stepping on people. It fits pretty comfortably into the horror genre.
But it's still really romancy, though.
Each subsequent adaptation of Kong has made the quote-unquote romance between the gorilla.
Yeah, but even in the first one, she still has some layer of care.
See, I really don't think so. I think in that first movie, Fay Wray is just nothing but terrified of Kong.
I don't know. I think you should go back and watch it.
The first movie is definitely part of jungle adventure genre, which is a genre that doesn't really exist anymore. It's not as if Africa is some unexplored, mysterious place anymore. The whole Lost World genre has fallen by the wayside, but Kong is definitely abreast of that. To the point where the guy who did the stop-motion effects for the movie, Willis O'Brien, previously did an adaptation of The Lost World, which some consider the very first kaiju movie in a lot of ways. But would you consider King Kong the first kaiju movie?
That would probably be the first kaiju movie.
Toho decided to make Godzilla because Kong was re-released in Japan in '54 or something and was an enormous hit. So they said, oh hey, we need our own giant monster.
Yeah, I guess he would have to be. Pretty much any other giant monster from then on was based off of Godzilla.
Kong is the granddaddy of the entire genre. There have been a number of films and adaptations over the years, some more official than others. We're going to try and squeeze in as many as we can. And mostly we're going to be talking about, I guess what you would say are the four main eras of Kong. The original films from the 30s, the two Toho films.
Well, the 70s.
The Peter Jackson era, and now our most recent one, which...
So that's 5.
Sure. You and your math. Jesus.
Godzilla vs. King Kong was in the 60s, so really we could link the 60s and 70s together.
Oh, sure we can.
Your point still stands.
Anyway, we got a lot of giant apery to talk about today, so let's get right to it.
We're millionaires, boys! I'll share it with all of you! Why, in a few months it'll be up in lights on Broadway! Kong! The eighth wonder of the world!
Wild, weird, wonderful. The stuff for which movies were made. Adventure, to make you wonder if it's true, while your eyes convince you that it is. Truly, the thrill of thrills. Don't miss it this time.
What do you think of this movie?
Well, it's a classic. You can't not love this movie.
Some people consider it the greatest film ever made.
Yeah, well, those people are wrong, because Wayne's World exists. All joking aside, it is a really good film.
Oh, yeah.
It's got atmosphere, like you're always talking about. And it's got the classic romance of the old monster movies.
The quote-unquote romance between Jack Driscoll and Fay Wray's character, Ann Darrow. It's very much of that 1930s adventure movie stuff. Tough sailor dude, glamorous broad, of course they're going to fall in love.
Yeah.
We don't even really need to summarize the plot of King Kong because it's so well known. Filmmaker Carl Denham makes an expedition to this mysterious, ominously named Skull Island. There they find crazy dinosaurs and monsters and a big-ass ape who falls
but look at all the money they save on special effects, right?
who falls in love with the girl, Anduro, and the ape gets captured, taken to New York, then escapes again and goes on a fucking rampage, climbs up the Empire State Building, gets shot down.
Yep, then something goes wrong for Fay Ray and King Kong. They got caught in a cellular jam.
A lot has been written about how the character in the movie, Carl Denham, is very much based off of the guy who actually made the movie, Marion C. Cooper, who was himself an explorer. And there's a line in there about recording a charging rhino, which is a thing that supposedly did actually happen to Marion C. Cooper.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, well,
I'll believe it when I see the footage.
I think he definitely was a self-myth maker. But the idea of 40-foot-tall gorilla, man, who even thinks of that?
I don't know, but this movie really pulls it off. There are times where you look at that.
The stop-motion effects are obviously, by modern standards, rather crude in some ways. But in other ways, a lot has been written about how, when you watch the movie, especially on Blu-ray or DVD, you can see Kong's hair moving in the wind, but it's not actually the wind. That was from the animator moving the model.
Oh, really?
Yeah, and it unintentionally created this really beautiful effect, making it look like the hair is moving in the wind, especially when he's on top of the Empire State Building. It doesn't look like a real gorilla effect. Sometimes it's rather cartoonish looking. But what makes it great is the amount of personality Kong has in this film. I mean,
and that's something that's missing with motion capture. I like motion capture for some things. They can do a lot of wonderful things with it, but sometimes seeing a cartoon character do a facial expression and seeing a stop motion creature do a facial expression, and then you consider the time and effort it took to make that thing do that facial expression, it really makes it mean more.
The difference between something that's physically there and something they made on a computer, you know?
Yeah.
The amount of personality that you get in Kong, the way his brow and his mouth twitches, he's excited or when he's angry or when he's even sad or afraid, that's really the thing that makes this movie so great. Kong himself is such a character, and a lot of the little personable things. When he's pissed off, he punches the ground, or maybe the most famous moment in the movie after the Empire State Building scene is after he kills the T-Rex and he plays with the jaw, something they do in almost every other King Kong movie. And the plot of the film is something you gotta think about. The middle section when they're on Skull Island, there's not a lot of story there. It must be said, rather cartoonishly racist natives try to sacrifice Anne to Kong, and then he just spends the next half an hour fighting different monsters that are trying to eat her. But it's fucking awesome. Yeah, I mean, obviously the fight with the T-Rex is the most famous scene. It
rips that thing right in half.
There's a shot that always sticks in my brain. It's a far shot where you can see them fighting through the trees, and Kong's climbing up on the T-Rex's back and punching it. It doesn't look real, but instead it becomes almost hyper-real. It takes on an almost dreamlike quality.
Yeah.
That's one of the reasons I love the horror movies from the 1930s, where they seem not entirely real. You're almost watching a dream or a nightmare. But it's not just the T-Rex he fights. He fights a pterodactyl, which is another scene I love. The sea serpent that comes out of the lake and tries to wrap around him. And we have to talk a little bit about not just the stop-motion effects, which are obviously groundbreaking, but some of the photography effects. There are scenes where you see Fay Ray in the foreground and Kong's in the background, and they had to figure out how to do that stuff. The technology didn't exist. And in some of those shots, what they actually did was they had still shots of the film. As they were moving the stop-motion stuff, they would roll the footage forward for every 1 second. Pretty clever. In my opinion, King Kong, the original one anyway, is undeniably a horror movie. Think of the scene where the brontosaurus comes out of the lake and eats the sailors.
There's definitely some strong horror elements. Find a gothic romance.
It's a little gothic. Something about Depression-era New York is inherently gothic, especially the scene with the brontosaurus because there's fog on the lake. Now it's kind of funny because now we know that brontosaurus, we know that brontosaurus isn't even a real dinosaur. A patasaur was a plant eater. It probably wouldn't have eaten people.
Kong wouldn't have eaten people either because gorillas only eat fruit.
Yeah, gorillas are vegetarians. But think of that scene where Kong is rampaging through the village and he's picking up structures and throwing them at people and he's stomping people into the ground. And I love it how they built an actual 2-scaled Kong foot, had an actor eye underneath of it. The Kong head is even better. What do you think of that giant King Kong head that we see several times in this film?
I mean, it's cool and all, but my favorite is the hand.
The hand is awesome. What I love about the head is the big googly eyes on it. It looks kind of goofy. And what of the infamous missing spider pit sequence? Legend has it. There's a scene in the film where a bunch of people are crossing a log across a gorge. Appears in almost, I think, in every other King Kong movie. Kong picks up the log and shakes it, and the guys fall off into this little valley. And in the release version, the version we've all seen, we just assume they die. But in the original theatrical premiere, they fell into this pit where a bunch of spiders and monsters came out and ate them. Rumor has it the sequence was so shocking that the filmmaker clipped it out because people were fainting in the theater. It was just too horrifying. It distracted from the rest of the film.
I've seen a lot of horror movies in my time. I've never seen a horror movie that was so scary, so shocking that I fainted. So I have a bullshit on that. Like, you know, people fainting at Frankenstein.
Yeah. Dracula, Phantom of the Opera.
Frankenstein, maybe. Nothing like that had really been seen until that point. But Dracula's like a normal guy. How is he going to cause someone to faint?
It was a long, long time ago, and I guess people's composures were different. It was...
Oh, Lord have mercy. I can't handle this Frankenstein.
Fate's dead away. Who knows if it's true or not, but it's a good story. As much of a beast as King Kong is, he's also very much a sympathetic character, too. That's another thing this movie has in common with Frankenstein, and I think another reason why I like it so much.
Recently, in the conversation we were having, you likened it to Creature from the Black Lagoon.
If you put Creature 1 and 2 together, you have almost the exact same plot as King Kong. That film was definitely influenced by this one. When he's with Fay Wray and Darrow, I don't really see any romance between them in this movie. She just spends almost the entire film screaming her head off, and when they bring Kong to New York later, Fay Wray has a line about that awful day on the island. But the gorilla is playful with her. There's a scene that was also cut out of later prints, luckily still survives, when Kong and Anne get a moment to themselves that she's passed out and he's peeling her clothes off a little bit. On one hand, it's like, ooh, big horny monkey, ha ha ha. But it's also sort of sweet, because he's just curious.
Yeah.
She's something he's never seen before. And honestly, the moment that always, I'm not going to say it makes me cry, but it tugs at my heartstring a little bit, is at the end, before Kong dies, before he falls off the Empire State Building. The last thing he does is he caresses Fay Wray one last time. Obviously, I think Kong is meant to be sympathetic. If he wasn't, it wouldn't have ended with that line about,
it was beauty that killed the beast.
Wasn't the airplanes, 'twas beauty that killed the beast. Except it wasn't, Carl. Mr. Denham, it was you. You asshole. You're the one who killed him, actually. It's your fault.
You would have never brought him to New York.
Yeah, you know. Put him on a stage with minimum security. What the fuck?
Every movie that he is in makes that mistake.
A gorilla that ranges in height from 40 to as much as 100 feet tall, you would think that they would have a little more restraint on him than some chains and ropes.
In the 70s version, even the cage setup they put him in instantly fails because they get cocky about it.
That's in the story, too. The hubris of mankind. Something we talked about when we did the Godzilla series, and it's very much the Kong story, too. This idea of man going to this wild, untamable world and thinking they can tame it. Though it's a little different. You gotta talk about the racial connotations of the 1933.
You don't have to. You're just choosing to.
No. I think this is what makes it a great movie. Instead of being just a good special effects monster movie, what makes it a great movie is the fact that you can read into it. Is Kong intentionally evocative of slavery? He's taken from a jungle country and he's put in chains and he's brought to America and put up on a stage. And some people have read some not-so-nice things about the relationship between Kong and Anne, this idea of the wild, dark-skinned, savage creature ravaging the pure, lily-white woman. The depiction of the Skull Island natives is not enlightened by modern standards.
Yeah, but no version of Kong is enlightened by modern standards.
Well, they try. We'll definitely talk about that. I don't think this was intended at all, because if you listen to Marion C. Cooper and the other guy, I can't think of his name, directed this movie, they very much just saw this as a classic adventure story. If you look at it now, I can't help but see a film about the way humankind tries to exploit nature. Finds out.
See, that's what I hate about doing these podcasts.
Oh, yeah, that I actually do an analytical reading of things?
Well, no, it's because you're trying to rub off on me, and now I can't watch a movie without being analytical.
I'm making you smarter, is what you're telling me.
No, I hate being smarter when watching movies. When I go to a movie, I want to get fully enveloped in the story of the movie, in the world of the movie, escape from my own world. Now, every time I go to a movie, I'm basing facts in that movie on facts in our world. Maybe the physics in that world don't work the same as the physics in our world.
Fair.
Maybe that's why it seems like Jason's teleporting, because in our world, that's the only way that could physically happen. Physics, man, they freak me out.
Let's talk about the end of the movie where Kong goes on that rampage for New York.
You know, he's tearing up buses and cars and shit.
The train derailing, that's in every version of Kong. It's still such a great sequence. Think about what the people on that train must be thinking. They're just going about their night and suddenly a giant gorilla walks up to the tracks. Or another one I always think about is when Kong's going through the city trying to find Anne. He sticks his hand into this woman's bedroom. Again, I love the prop, the giant gorilla hand. Sees that it isn't Fay Wray and just drops her.
Yeah, well, that happens in pretty much every version of Kong.
Yeah, think about that woman's life. Oops. And again, we go back to the image of Kong on top of the Empire State Building. One of the most famous sequences in cinema history. If you go to the top of the Empire State Building today and their gift shop, they still sell little plushes of King Kong.
Aww.
That image of Kong fighting the biplanes. What can you even say about that hasn't already been said?
Traumatic.
Iconic doesn't even seem strong enough.
I say traumatic. You spend this whole movie falling in love with this character. You fall in love with King Kong. You just want to give this guy a hug. And
well, if you did, he'd rip your head off.
It's not his fault. He's not used to that setting. He's high stress.
He's very stressed. past, yes.
It really is not his fault that he's behaving that way. He's out of his environment. He doesn't know how to handle the situation he's in. And you just want to walk up to him and be like, it's okay, Kong. It's okay, buddy.
It's cool, Kong.
But it's a very emotional movie. You're watching your friend get shot to death.
And I've always felt it was callous the way Kong dies. That wide shot of his corpse falling off the Empire State Building.
Yeah.
I know the filmmakers definitely intended Kong to be sympathetic to a degree. I think Kong might have actually been more likable than they intended. It really, really is a great, great movie. And I know we've talked about Fay Wray a little bit before on your Scream Queen episodes, but let's just give a moment to point out the first Scream Queen, Fay Wray. There's a lot more we could say. It's a great fucking movie.
Yeah.
It's a masterpiece.
Now, when you say great fucking movie,
Oh, no. We gotta talk about this. Gorillas, proportionally, have
the smallest penis
of all primates.
of all primates.
This raises an interesting question. If a normal gorilla's penis is only about 2 inches long, what does that say about Kong?
Kong is about 6 times the size of a normal gorilla.
Yeah.
6 times 2 is 12. See, it's a 12-inch dick. It's totally possible.
It's totally possible. We can make it work, baby.
Maybe that's what went wrong for Fay Wray and King Kong.
I think it is.
Skipper, believe it or not, there's a little Kong.
But the woman who wrote the script, Ruth Rose, knew it was going to be much cheaper and that it couldn't possibly equal the original film. And she was actually quoted as saying, if you can't make it better, you can at least make it funnier.
King Kong is a great movie. Everybody knows it. Even people who haven't seen it know what this movie is and what it's about. But what a lot of people don't know is that there's a sequel to it. And it seems in a lot of ways to be completely overlooked. We're dorks. We know this. But if you go up to the average person on the street and ask them about The Son of Kong, I think odds are good they would have no fucking clue what you were talking about.
Yeah, probably.
Son of Kong is like the textbook definition of the cheapy sequel. It may be the original rushed out sequel. This movie came out 9 months after the original King Kong. Even for 1933, that is a staggering turnaround.
I have a confession to make.
A confession to make about Son of Kong?
Yeah, I maybe like the special effects in this one a little better.
You like it when his eyes roll around in his head and he makes the big goofy smile?
Yeah, I like the characterization of the Son of Kong. They have to make him different than Kong, because he's the son.
He's Kong Jr.
Yeah, he's Kong Jr., he's not fully grown, he's not a fully grown giant ape. I like the characterization, but aside from that, on a technical standpoint, they seem a little smoother.
That is fair. At this point, Willis O'Brien had done it already. There was some precedent. Fair to say that the special effects are perhaps a little bit better. And by the way, Son of Kong does have a name. His name is Coco.
Yes, I remember.
But let's just call him Kong Jr. because Coco is not intimidating. That makes him sound like a house cat.
Yeah. Here, Coco.
The special effects are cool. Love the fight with the giant cave bear.
Yeah.
Or at the end where he's fighting. It's a type of dinosaur, but it's basically a fucking dragon.
Yeah.
The other dinosaurs, there's an awesome Styracosaur in this that looks great. What I object to is the fact that Kong Jr. is so cute. Really cutesy.
But again, I think he's supposed to be.
Obviously, the idea was to soften the movie. Maybe the first Kong was too spicy of a meatball for some people, so they said, okay, let's make him cuter. So he has the goofy facial expressions, and it's very clownish. Unlike Kong, who fucking eats people, doesn't give a shit, Kong Jr. befriends the heroes as soon as they meet him.
Yeah, he just follows him around like a lost puppy. It's cute.
I think it just goes a little too far. That's my issue with it. Son of Kong does start with a pretty interesting idea. Beginning of this movie, Carl Denham has been sued into poverty, which seems realistic.
Yeah.
You bring a 40-foot-tall, 20-ton gorilla to New York City, he gets out, he kills a bunch of people. It seems pretty realistic that there would be lawsuits. In order to get away from his legal troubles, he jumps back on a ship. This is a short movie. It's only about an hour long. The first half an hour is devoted to him in this Chinese port city, where he meets a bunch of monkeys and a cute girl who sings and an angry Norwegian guy. And eventually they do find their way back to Skull Island. But that first half is a little slow.
The pacing is a little off. I didn't say it was a better movie.
It is a much lesser film than King Kong.
But I was just saying that I like the special effects.
I do like Helen Mack, who plays the girl in this one, because she's tough. She's not like Fay Wray, who's just screaming and passing out and everything. Once they finally get to the fucking island, the movie picks up a lot, and you do have cool monsters. How does this movie end? Do you remember?
Diddy Kong saving the day and then perishing.
Skull Island sinks into the sea.
Yeah, and then you just see his little hand bob up and down out of the ocean. Slowly drifts to his watery grave.
Yeah, it's kind of sad. Coco saves Carl Denham.
But he goes out way better than his dad. He goes out like a hero, and his dad goes out like a villain.
Obviously, this Kong is much more heroic than his father. Assuming this is literally the Son of Kong, we don't really know. There's no gorilla genetic testing.
I'm just saying, he looks like his mother. He's got white fur. He's the Blizzard ape from...
Yeah, Primal Rage.
Primal Rage. Wasn't that thing that's named Blizzard?
I believe it was Blizzard. There were two, because the other one was...
like Inferno or something.
No, Inferno was the dinosaur. The other one, he was the god of decay, and he would fart and puke on you.
Oh, yeah.
I can't think of its name. The start of the movie, Carl Denham actually feels a little bad about what happened to King Kong, which is good. That's character development on his half. But it still ends with him getting away. He finds a treasure on the island that will allow him to pay all his legal fees. I really feel like, for it to be fair, Carl Denham should have gotten eaten by a dinosaur.
Right.
Son of Kong, I don't hate it.
You know what I do hate about the film, though?
What's that?
Is how Carl Denham treats Kong Jr.
He's a dick.
He's a complete asshole to this ape, and what has he done to him? Nothing.
He saves his fucking life at the end.
Yeah, well, he saves his life the whole fucking movie.
For a monster fan, this one's worth seeing just for the dinosaurs. But overall, it's a generic film. Not too much to recommend of Son of Kong.
The great Godzilla, blazing a trail of terror to his Japanese homeland, roaring defiance to the only enemy on Earth strong enough to challenge him. The unconquerable King Kong, giant gorilla god of this South Seas paradise. But nothing, nobody can stop the great showdown when King Kong and Godzilla meet to fight for survival of the fittest.
We mentioned earlier the influence that King Kong had on the original Godzilla. I'm sure we talked about this when we did our Godzilla episode. In the early 60s, King Kong was way more popular than Godzilla. By that point, Godzilla had only had 2 movies. Kong, meanwhile, was still this hugely popular, well-known character, internationally recognized. We've already talked about King Kong vs. Godzilla from 1962. I do want to talk more about the pre-production. This started out as a sequel Willis O'Brien wanted to make to the original Kong, King Kong vs. Frankenstein. Kong somehow survived the events of the first movie and would end up fighting a giant monster made from parts of African animals. That would have been your Frankenstein monster. This idea traded legal hands, ended up with Toho. And Toho said, well, we like King Kong, we like the giant Frankenstein, but how about we sub that out for Godzilla instead? Toho would make a giant Frankenstein movie eventually. That's how King Kong vs. Godzilla got made. The original Japanese version, I think, is great. It's one of my favorite Godzilla movies.
I don't think I've ever seen the original Japanese version.
Probably not, because it's never been given an official release here in America. Universal owns the American rights to this movie, and they don't really give a shit about it. They've released it on DVD and Blu-ray, but there are no special features or anything. And it's always the dub-only version. The dub, which took out most of Akira Ifukube's great score and replaced it with library music. You watch the English dub, you can hear the Creature from the Black Lagoon theme. And then they cut in those fucking terrible scenes of the dude in the news office talking about how Kong is a thinking animal. None of that stuff's in the original Japanese version. King Kong vs. Godzilla is still the most attended of any Godzilla movie.
Really?
Like, it's the one that had the most people to come see it. Talk about the ending, the double ending rumor, it's bullshit, it's not true at all. Kong wins in every version.
Mammoth, Behemoth, Goliath, King Kong escapes and meets his greatest foe, the Kong of Steel. A gargantuan duel, unmatched by any battle in history. Thundering 60-foot robot Kong of Steel, creation of the evil Doctor Who. King Kong shakes the earth. King Kong fights for life. 1,000 thrills as King Kong battles the serpent of Mondo Island, hits himself against a nation's armament, and plunges a beautiful girl into a world of terror.
Obviously, Toho liked King Kong. They wanted to do more with Kong. And I can only assume that there were legal reasons why Toho didn't do another King Kong movie until 1967. In the Japanese film industry, where they would sometimes crank these things out once or twice a year, that's a long wait.
Yeah.
But they did eventually make another one, King Kong Escaped, which is not a sequel to King Kong vs. Godzilla. It's actually a loose adaptation of the King Kong cartoon that was on at the time.
I like it. I mean, it's not a good film, but I like it. King Kong versus Robo Gorilla. Mecha-Kong is what it is.
Mechani-kong.
Or whatever.
Yeah, but let's just call him Mecha-Kong. The main thing I'll say about it is that the gorilla suit looks a little better.
It looks a lot better.
It looks better. At least this one's face can move a little bit. Doesn't look quite so flea-bitten.
Yeah.
The plot for this one is completely ridiculous. A group of UN-sanctioned explorers are looking for oil on this place called Mondo Island, and instead they find King Kong. Meanwhile, a mad scientist named Doctor Who doesn't travel around in a TARDIS, doesn't have a robot dog. He has built a robotic Kong to dig up plutonium in the Arctic. Mechani-Kong breaks down Doctor Who's financer, who is this evil Asian lady known as Madam X, decides, hey, let's go get the real King Kong instead. And our 3 heroes, American dude, a Japanese dude, and a chick, are dragged along. Why do they assume that a giant gorilla is necessary to mine for plutonium? We gotta dig up plutonium, it's gotta be a gorilla. You can build a giant robot, why not just build a really efficient crane?
Or a laser shovel.
Yeah, why must it be a giant gorilla, Doctor Who? I don't think Madam X is getting her money's worth. And there are a lot of really goofy plot holes. The villain captures the girl, Susan, because Kong, of course, falls in love with her. Yeah. After capturing the girl, Doctor Who reveals that he has a device that can hypnotize Kong into doing his bidding. So why did he capture the girl in the first place?
I don't know, because movies. But when Kong fights Mecha-Kong, amazing, right?
Actually, the fight I like is with Gorosaurus, the giant dinosaur on the island.
That's cool.
Kong's backflipping. Gorosaurus has this kangaroo kick where he rears up on his tail, and Kong kills the dinosaur by breaking its jaw. That's his trademark finishing move. And then he fights a giant snake at one point. That stuff is cool. The Mecha-Kong stuff I find to be a little disappointing. They fight a little bit, and they climb Tokyo Tower. Kong has got to climb a tall building. Kong doesn't actually kill Mecha-Kong. Madam X has some misgivings about what she's doing, and destroys the control panel in Doctor Who's laboratory. Cool looking design. I mean, it's ridiculous, but it's cool. It's a giant Tin Man gorilla. I feel this movie has a big James Bond element to it. Doctor Who is like a Bond villain. He has an underground base. It's full of identically clad henchmen. Actress who plays Madam X, that's May Hama, who had appeared in You Only Live Twice. He even puts the heroes in a death trap at one point. I believe it's a giant room that freezes. And there is some cool monster stuff at the end, though, when Kong goes crazy and destroys the ship that Doctor Who's on. He's pretty relaxed as far as a giant pissed off gorilla goes. But in that last act, Kong, if you'll excuse the pun, goes apeshit.
That was the sound of me slapping my knee, audience.
It's goofy as hell, but King Kong Escapes is fun.
Yeah. Ultimately, isn't that what you want when you go to a movie, is to be entertained?
Well, it's certainly what I want when I go to a giant gorilla movie. And Akira Ifukube makes a great score, a score that's really beautiful, way, way better than the movie accompanying it.
It is 1976. The American merchant vessel Petrox Explorer has just set sail from the port of Surabaya in search of oil. What they find will shock the world. They will discover an uncharted island that is the home of the most incredible creature on the face of the earth. A creature called Kong. Dino De Laurentiis presents the most exciting original motion picture event of all time. King Kong, with Jeff Bridges, Charles Grodin, and starring the eighth wonder of the world, King Kong.
King Kong got a remake in 76.
Wow.
You have to think about what the film climate was like. This was post-Jaws. It was the same year as Star Wars. We were at the beginning of the era of blockbuster filmmaking. Producer Dino De Laurentiis, this very famous Italian producer, said, I'm going to remake the biggest blockbuster of all time. The thing is, De Laurentiis said some stuff in the press that has lived in infamy. The first of which is, quote, no one a cry when Jaws die, but when the monkey die, everybody a gonna cry. And also he said that King Kong was going to be played in his remake by a 40-foot tall robot.
The entire film.
Yes, the entire film. Which was, well, misleading, to say the least. That giant robot's in the movie.
It's in 2 scenes.
For about 2 seconds. And what you see of the giant robot, it doesn't look very good.
No.
Does
it looks like a robot covered in yak hair.
Depleted the supply of commercially available yak hair around the world, and it moves very, very stiffly, and it doesn't look a damn thing like the way Kong looks in the rest of the film. I don't think the technology existed then, I'm not even sure it exists now, to have King Kong be played by a literal giant robot.
And if that technology exists, I am leaving the planet.
Because of those statements, those misleading statements that were made to the press, a lot of people chat on this King Kong because they were expecting revolutionary, groundbreaking special effects movie, and what they got was a guy in a gorilla suit. Albeit a very good gorilla suit, but it's still a guy in a gorilla suit. What do you think of 1967's King Kong?
I mean, it's alright. I don't think it was needed. It tells pretty much the same exact story with some slight variances.
Right.
The main group of people is different, and what their task is different.
Yeah.
It comes out of the energy crisis era of America.
They go to Skull Island looking
but
for
oil.
oil.
All intents and purposes, it's the same story. And the romance is definitely heightened on this one.
Do you want to talk about Jessica Lange's character's name? Dwan?
Yeah, Dwan. Because it's like Dawn, but I switched to the W and the A.
They really did try to update it for the 70s. You have this oil crisis element because they're looking for oil, and they find it, but it's not usable. So it becomes this campy satire about corporate imperialism, and I really don't think that works. Charles Grodin's character, who I'll always remember as the dad from Beethoven.
That's who that was.
Yeah, it's Charles Grodin.
I was looking at that the whole time. I was, who the hell is that guy?
Yeah, he plays the douchebag Fred Wilson, the oil executive stooge, a completely ridiculous, goofy character. And the relationship between Jessica Lange's Dwan and Kong is much more blatantly romantic. She actually has a bit of affection for the gorilla. She cries
but not
when it
really.
dies. Yeah, because her character's...
It's kind of bitchy last act of the movie.
She's very much seeking fame.
She's self-centered. There was one minor touch that I kind of liked. She ultimately gets her fame at the end of the movie.
Yeah.
And she doesn't want it.
At the end, she's next to Kong's corpse and she's surrounded by paparazzi. Jeff Bridges' character is in the crowd, but he can't get to her.
He stops
and
just looks at her and stares her down. And I'm wondering wondering if maybe he saw the crowd of paparazzi. He says, you know what? She got what she wanted. Why am I chasing this girl?
Yeah, and that is definitely in the film The Price of Fame. This movie is much more cynical than the 1933 version. They were definitely trying to make a King Kong for the 70s. It certainly gives you something to talk about, but I'm not sure it has any place in a King Kong movie.
Right, he only fights one monster.
Yeah, that's
the whole movie.
That's the real bullshit. There are no dinosaurs on the Skull Island. Come on, what's a King Kong movie where he doesn't fight a dinosaur?
He fights a snake and he does break the jaw.
That's it.
Like, he's a 40-foot tall gorilla, right?
Mm-hmm.
That's a 40-foot tall snake, so really it's just an anaconda. That exists in the world.
I don't think anacondas are quite that big. Point is, it's not that impressive. This Skull Island's kind of boring. It's trying to be campier than the original, but also more realistic.
Pick a tone.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah. What do we think of the special effects in this movie?
The suit animation is really great.
It is. It looks a little awkward. Kong is upright in this film. It does look like a guy in a suit, but you look at the expressiveness in the gorilla mask. For 1976, it's an impressive mask.
Pretty impressive, expressive mask.
Rick Baker would obviously go on to become one of the special effects greats. Talking a little bit about Jessica Lange, she's fine as a performance. The movie puts her in a number of really ridiculous costumes. They were really trying to make her into a sex symbol. I like the jean shorts, I'll admit.
You know what I don't like about the movie is that she's always doing this, just throwing herself around, halfway between a faint and a conscious. Oh Lord, this giant ape.
What do we think of that scene with the waterfall? Kong gives her a bath and then blow dries her.
It's a nice touch with Kong, but do we need it?
Jeff Bridges is in this. This is an early role for the dude. And he's fine, I suppose.
I'm the dude.
That giant ape really tied the whole island together. Talking about the campy aspect of this movie, when they bring Kong back to New York, what do they do with him?
They put him in a giant
gas pump, yeah. He's in this bamboo cage.
It's not bamboo, it's metal.
It looks bamboo. Whose bright idea was that? We got a 40-foot tall gorilla. This is gonna hold him. Oh, he gets out and kills people? Who saw that coming?
I did. I've seen this movie before.
I do like the train sequence in this one.
Yeah.
Throws it down. That shit's cool. Hey, it's 1976. He's not going to climb the Empire State Building. There's a new tallest building in the world. He's going to climb the World Trade Center, which makes this film age great.
One of the helicopters falls into one of the World Trade Centers and explodes.
Yeah. Oh, yeah.
Could you just imagine they would have used biplanes instead of helicopters?
Ooh. Oh, man. It would have made this even more awkward. Just the thought process behind that. Hey, it's 1976. We got a new tallest building in the world. We got to remake King Kong so he can climb it. But what do you think of those photography effects when he falls from the tower?
Oh, boy.
The suit stuff is good. The photography effects are terrible. 76 is King Kong. I don't hate it.
Like, why?
It doesn't make me feel a thing. It's not a bad movie. It's not a good movie. It's just very much a mediocre, forgettable film.
I think it tries to focus too much on character development for the human characters. Loses the awe factor of Kong.
Yeah, it's definitely a long movie. It's like a 2-hour and 8-minute long film, I think.
2 hour and 18 minutes.
Okay, yeah. So it's a long movie.
King Kong has returned. But this time, he's not alone. He's found someone to protect. He's found something to live for. But no one wants him to survive. They had chased him once before. Now they are trying to kill him again. But this time, he is fighting back.
America's biggest hero is back. And he is not happy. King Kong lives.
Despite its critical blubbering, the 76 King Kong was a massive hit. I believe it was the 4th highest grossing film of the year. For some reason, it took them a decade to get a sequel made, and I can only assume this is because of the tangled legal issues surrounding King Kong's ownership. Character rights are owned by somebody else, the movies are owned by somebody else. Some parts are in the public domain, it is crazy. But when 1986's King Kong Lives came out, unlike the first film, it was a massive box office flop. As the title indicates, King Kong Lives begins with the unlikely supposition that Kong survived his fall from the World Trade Center. The big monkey's been on life support for a decade, while they find a suitable blood donor so they can put a giant pacemaker inside of him. That blood donor is found when they discover a female giant ape in Borneo. Kong falls in love with her and they escape and shenanigans ensue. Been a while since you've seen this one, right?
Yeah.
It's not well regarded. King Kong Lives is generally considered one of the worst films ever made. It's not that bad. It's not good, but it is enjoyably bad in some ways.
Well, it's been a while since I've seen the movie. I remember really liking the relationship between Kong and Konga.
Lady Kong is actually what they call her.
Oh, is it?
King Kong has always fallen in love with human women, and in this movie he finally gets a girlfriend that is actually compatible with him.
Well, as we've previously discussed.
Aside from the mechanics, the idea of King Kong finding a female Kong and falling in love with her and raising a family, it's dumb, but it's also sort of nice. 70s.
About time. Way to go, buddy.
All the King Kong stories about him being an outsider in a strange land, rejected by the woman he loves. Satisfying to see him finally find mutual
and
love.
Also, you actually care for Kong in this one.
We always like Kong.
We've mentioned it in the last film, it didn't really make us feel anything.
Yeah, it's
and
true.
At least in this one...
That's a fair point. The 76 version had campy stuff in it, and the sequel is much campier. Early scene where they're opening Kong's chest with what looks like a giant pizza slicer and lowering the pacemaker in.
Okay, but how else were they going to perform surgery on a giant ape?
That's true. This one isn't set in a city. This is set in the American Southwest. He's lumbering through suburbia, and he walks on a golf course, and somebody hits him in the face with a golf ball. There's 2 or 3 times in this film where King Kong or Lady Kong sneak up on a group of people. Probably be pretty easy to spot a 40-foot-tall gorilla coming at you.
Especially 2 of them. Wouldn't there be some vibrations in the earth or something?
Yeah, you would hear them. And there's a really goofy moment where he fights a bunch of good old boy rednecks. I don't know if King Kong versus a bunch of Cletuses and Leroys was a thing we needed. Linda Hamilton stars in this movie.
Yes, she does. And she's way hotter than Jessica Lange.
That's fair. The movie tries to do this thing where they parallel the love story between Kong and Lady Kong with Linda Hamilton's character, Dr. Franklin, and the guy who discovered Lady Kong, Brian Kerwin, is the actor. And the problem is those 2 actors have no romantic chemistry at all. They actually seem like they hate each other. Halfway through the movie, they found Kong in the forest. She opens up her sleeping bag. It's out of nowhere. She fucks him, and suddenly they're in love.
But the Kong stuff was cool.
The scene where he's killing the rednecks is really gratuitously violent. He grabs a human and snaps him in half. And
I shouldn't have fucked with him.
Picks up another guy and eats him, and you can see Kong chewing, and then he swallows.
He's the Wu-Tang ape.
King Kong ain't nothing to fuck with. At the end, King Kong and his girlfriend are in a barn, and the military, because obviously there's an insane general who's obsessed with killing Kong, the military have encircled Kong, and he's throwing tanks around and blowing shit up. The bad guy stumbles into a random cemetery, and Kong crushes him. Oh, he's already in a cemetery. Great, you won't have to bury him again.
Oh, something I forgot to mention about the last film.
Oh, what's that?
Just hit me, sorry.
We'll fix it in post.
One scene that I really liked was when Kong threw the propane tank and exploded and killed those 3 soldiers.
Yeah.
And Jeff Bridges was like, yeah! Get those dirty bastards!
Yeah, there's very much anti-corporate, anti-war aspect to that 76 Kong.
Yeah, there is.
Even though the title's King Kong Lives, he dies at the end. The female Kong does give birth before he dies, so we get to see Kid Kong. And what I want to mention about that is the producers of this movie went to the animation company Filmation, the same guys who made He-Man, and said, we want you to make a Kid Kong cartoon. Kid Kong would have talked, and he would have been able to shift his eyes like Ultraman, and he would have had a submarine made of coconuts. That would have been fucking insane. But even though Kong dies, King Kong Lives does have kind of a happy ending, because Lady Kong and Kid Kong are sent to a nature preserve in Borneo, where no douchebags and helicopters can bother them. King Kong Lives, not a good film. Very poorly written film, but the special effects are pretty great, and the monster stuff is fun in a really, really ridiculous way. I can't really recommend it. In some ways, I actually do like it more than the 76 version.
I've come into possession of a map. An uncharted island. A place that was thought to exist only in myth. Until now. That's where I'm gonna shoot my picture.
You're feeling uneasy, Ann. The feeling's growing. It's washing over you. Scream, Ann! Scream for your life!
They made another one.
Yes, they did. And this one's stupid good.
In 2005, Peter Jackson had just come off of Lord of the Rings, which was a huge phenomenon.
Movie companies were just throwing in money to make us something.
Yeah, they said, hey, what do you want to make, man? And Peter Jackson dreamed, before he made The Frighteners, he was talking about wanting to make this, was a new version of King Kong. Peter Jackson is a super fan. It's his all-time favorite movie. And for years and years, he wanted to make a new version. Hey, after you make 3 of the highest-grossing films of all time, they let you do that kind of thing. As you said, this is a great movie. I genuinely think it is a really, really good film.
There's one thing I don't like about the film.
Its length?
Yeah.
It's way too long.
It's not so much its length, but more its pacing. Problem.
Yeah, the movie is 3 hours and 8 minutes long. That's actually the theatrical version. Apparently there's a director's cut that adds in 12 additional minutes.
You know, when you're only adding 11 or 12 minutes, why even bother? I'm just saying.
There's a lot of stuff on that boat.
Yeah, an hour on the boat, an hour on the island, and an hour in New York.
Almost exactly like that.
The boat stuff could have been cut down immensely.
Yeah, did we need to know about the individual crew members? Did we need to know, oh, they have chloroform on the boat because they ship animals, which is why they're able to knock Kong out later in the movie? Did we need to know about the kid reading Heart of Darkness, or the actor, somebody goes into his room and draws mustaches on his posters? Like, did we absolutely need that shit?
Isn't it Ralph Fiennes in this?
No, it's Thomas Kretschmann is the German dude.
That's who that is.
He's also also Baron von Strucker in Avengers 2.
I always get this guy's confused.
Aside from that, I think this is a really good movie. And what's really interesting is it's almost a meta take on the original. The 1933 King Kong is the movie they made in this universe based on the true events that are being depicted here.
Yeah.
There's an early scene, they're looking for an actress, and he says, well, what about Faye? The driver says, oh, Faye's making a movie for RKO. And Carl Denham says, oh, I'm Cooper. Yeah, ha ha ha, we get it. And the scenes later on the boat that Carl Denham's filming are directly from the original Kong. There's very much a meta element. This is the quote-unquote real story of King Kong. Adrian Brody's Jack Driscoll is very different from the original one.
Yeah.
This one, he's a playwright. He's a New York intellectual. And Naomi Watts' Ann Darrow is a failed actress who has given up on her dreams. The movie opens with them closing the vaudeville theater she was working in. And there's a really great scene when Carl Denham finds her and she says that she doesn't believe in true love or happy endings. But she also has a very physical sense of humor because she's a dancer. But what do we think of Jack Black in this? Interesting casting.
I remember him being okay. He wasn't a bad actor, but he wasn't overwhelmingly good either.
He is good, and especially the way he plays up Carl Denham's almost villainous aspects. The character is a bullshitter. He'll tell you whatever you want to hear so he can get you to do what he wants you to do.
Yeah.
But the problem is he's still Jack Black. He doesn't disappear into the part. It still feels like, why is the guy from School of Rock on Skull Island?
Why is half a Tenacious D on Skull Island?
Yeah.
Is he going to whip out a guitar, defeat Kong with the power of rock? If not, then why is he in this movie?
It kind of feels that way sometimes. Once they get to Skull Island, the movie picks up a lot. There are some uncomfortable racial connotations with the way the natives were portrayed in the original. The solution they cook up with is either better or makes it worse. They have ambiguously brown skin and they're almost like goblins. There's this very witch-like woman. They tie a guy down and cut his head off.
So it's like Green Inferno put into a Kong movie.
It's a little bit like a cannibal movie. I don't know if that makes it less racist. They're not black anymore, but what do we think of the creatures on Skull Island, especially Kong himself?
Kong is amazing.
Yeah, this version of King Kong is fucking great.
I love how they have scars on him.
He's been on an island full of dinosaurs. He's been fighting all his life.
Yeah, it adds a little bit more character to him, makes him seem more menacing.
They obviously reached for realism. He moves and looks like a real gorilla. Andy Serkis did the motion capture for Kong, and his performance is fucking great. And it's a really nuanced physical performance. This one has the spider pit scene, and I don't know about you, something that really makes my skin crawl are a bunch of bugs in like a tight area together. Open
like
up.
Indiana Jones?
Yeah, and this movie is like that except they're giant. That sequence where they're in the spider pit just makes me uncomfortable. Where Naomi Watts is running from Kong, and she hides in a log, and a giant centipede crawls down towards her head.
Kill that, Kong! Kill it! Make it dead!
The scene where Adrian Brody, they have these giant weedas climbing on him, cutting his face with their spurs, really makes me squirm. But what about the dinosaurs? There are a shit ton of dinosaurs in this movie.
There are a shit ton of dinosaurs in this movie.
They fucking deliver. The dinosaurs are a major attraction of this version of King Kong. Say what you will about Peter Jackson. The man has made some questionable choices over his career, but he knew the dinosaurs were important. That brontosaurus stampede, little velociraptor things run around and eating them, and the fight between Kong and the T-Rex is amazing.
Isn't there 2 or 3 of them?
Yeah, there's 3. They're falling off a cliff, and they're all wrapped up in vines, and they're still trying to eat the girl throughout this entire fight. It just keeps building and building and building until we finally get like a showdown. And it ends the same way with him splitting the jaw open and then playing with it.
Yeah, and then the romance in this is really upplayed.
Big part of this one.
I like the romance factor. It's almost like she views Kong as a human being.
She respects him.
But she doesn't respect him the same way that the Islanders respect him. They revere him as a god. She reveres him as a friend.
They're on a rocky cliff together, and she dances to make him laugh because she's afraid Giant Ape's going to eat her. What makes that scene even better is Kong is laughing and then knocks her over a couple of times and laughs. She won't stand for that. She jumps up and bops him on the nose, and he has a temper tantrum afterwards. Hey, you can't do that to me. I'm King Kong.
This movie adds so much personality to this ape.
And at least understands Kong. She's not afraid of him. Makes the end half of this movie a tragedy. There's a great scene after Kong has gone nuts in Times Square and after they've ice skated in Central Park where he's climbing the Empire State Building and the camera pulls back. And we as audience members know what's going to happen. We know what happens when King Kong climbs the Empire State Building. It becomes sad. You know, he's going to die. When he dies, it feels very tragic. In this version, it becomes a futile last stand for Kong because he knows this is the end for him. He's going to go down fighting. He's going to die on his terms. Anne and Kong look at each other before he tumbles off of the Empire State Building. It's sad.
Let's talk about the scene on top of the Empire State Building. It really makes Kong a badass.
Jumping up and swiping planes out of the sky.
Like, he fights hardcore.
He's a street fighting ape.
He shoryukens a few planes and everything.
The action is great. Peter Jackson usually knows how to do that stuff. The stuff in New York bursts through the wall of the theater, and he tears open a bus as if it's a tin can. Peter Jackson's King Kong, it's long. It's way too fucking long, but it's still really good somehow. Don't know how the movie can both be flawed in such an obvious way and yet still be so fucking great.
It's a modern masterpiece.
I would use that word for it. And unfortunately, I don't think Peter Jackson's made a good movie since then. I think the Hobbit movies broke his spirit.
I like the Hobbit films for the most part.
These are photos of an island in the South Pacific.
The place where myth and science meet.
Is that a monkey?
You knew that thing was out here?
I'm sorry for your men, Colonel, but if you want to make their sacrifice worthwhile, get us home with proof. Monsters exist.
That's Kong. He's king around here.
Kong's god on the island. But the devils live below us.
It's a good group of boys. We're all gonna die together out here.
So that brings us up to now. Hey, we have a new King Kong movie in theaters. Kong Skull Island. What really excited me about this movie isn't a remake. It's a brand new King Kong story. Going in, I was hoping this movie is 2 hours of Kong tearing shit up in his homeland, being a badass, fighting monsters and dinosaurs. I'd be okay with that. And you know what? That's pretty much what it is. Yeah.
Don't fuck with Kong.
The film set in 1973, literally the end of the Vietnam War just happened. The secret government agency called Monarch is leading an expedition to an unexplored island, and they grab a British special service guy, he's their tracker, and the war photographer's there, and all these soldiers who've just been decommissioned from Vietnam. Lead them onto this island where, of course, they discover King Kong and a bunch of monsters. It's an island where everything wants you dead so hard.
Doesn't do the dinosaur thing.
Not quite. I was a little disappointed in that.
But it does give us the skull crawlers.
Kind of like giant monitor lizards with external skulls.
They're weird.
And I do like the skull crawlers. Though
They're a dinosaur.
I do wish dinosaurs were in the movie. We see dinosaur skulls in one scene. My favorite monster in this, aside from Kong himself, was that giant spider with the bamboo legs.
Yeah, that was pretty cool.
We're introduced to this giant spider when he impales a guy through the face.
Amazing.
It's surprisingly graphic for a PG-13. I think this is the only PG-13 movie you'll ever see that pays homage to cannibal holocaust. Then there's Kong himself, and this is the biggest American Kong. This Kong's about 100 feet tall.
And he's still growing.
They do make a point of saying he is still growing, so he will get bigger. He's bipedal. The way he walks around, he looks like Bigfoot. It's a great creation. The special effects are really very good.
Yeah.
I did have a really good time with this film, but I just wish we got a little more Kong.
Yeah.
There is a little bit of stuff between him and the girl, Brie Larson's character. He seems to be interested in her, but we really don't get any connection between the girl and the ape in this one.
I kind of like it, though. Like a fresh take. It proves that Kong is more than just some horny ape that wants to take the town virgin once a month.
There's no sacrificial element in this movie at all. This Kong is pretty benevolent.
That's what we need if they're setting it up for a future Versus film, which we'll get into later.
The movie has this Vietnam War movie aesthetic, and it concerns itself rather directly with war. John C. Reilly plays this World War II vet that crash landed on the island during the war, and he's been living there for 3 decades. And John C. Reilly's great. He's hilarious. He's also this idea of Samuel Jackson's character, Lieutenant Packard, seems annoyed that the U.S. admitted defeat in Vietnam. It feels to me he comes to Skull Island, they drop a bunch of bombs, Kong gets pissed off and starts basically killing everybody. It's this Ahab-like obsession with killing Kong, but to me it really feels like he's pissed off that they lost in Vietnam, and he wants to kill Kong because he wants to win.
Yeah.
That's in there, and that is interesting, but really for me it is about the monster fights. That first action sequence, they're in the helicopters, you get introduced to Kong when you just see a tree flying into frame and hitting the one copter.
Yeah.
The camera's weaving in and out of the helicopters as they're spinning and falling through the sky, and Kong's eating people.
He's stepping on people.
Yeah, the fight scene with the octopus is cool.
Yes, he fights an octopus, people.
That's obviously a Toho reference.
Yeah, I mean, that's...
And then he eats the octopus, which is a nice touch. And then there's the big fight with the giant skull crawler, the big one. Has some pretty fun stuff in it. There's one scene we really want to talk about.
The Shoryuken?
Well, there's that, and get over here!
Oh, yeah.
This is how fucking close JD and I are. There's a scene, they're fighting in the outskirts of the island, a bunch of shipwrecks around. Kong grabs a propeller on a chain, throws the propeller at the monster, hits it, and yanks it towards him. And you and I synchronize in perfect timing, lean into each other and say, get over here! Yeah, because we're fucking dorks. Yeah, the Shoryuken, too, he wraps the propeller around his fist, does an uppercut against the monster.
Yeah, but a jumping uppercut.
Yeah, and there's no way the people making this movie didn't say, like, oh, hey, let's have King Kong do a Shoryuken.
Why the fuck not?
He attempts to kill the giant skull crawler by breaking the jaws, but that's not how he takes it down.
Isn't the Shoryuken how he takes it down?
No, he rips his guts out.
Oh, that's right.
He shoves his fist down its throat and rips his guts out.
Yeah.
And all that monster stuff I like a lot. Some of the narrative flow in the film is a little awkward. For about half of the movie, we're following 3 different groups of characters. characters, and one of those characters ends up getting eaten. Some of the performances are really cool. John Goodman's really good. Samuel Jackson's gets to yell and be crazy and over the top, so that's always fun. Like I said, John C. Reilly's great. Tom Hiddleston and Brie Larson, their characters are not really that interesting to me.
Yeah.
Boring protagonist characters. A problem the legendary Godzilla movie also had. Production design of the movie is great. Everything on the island is awesome, but sometimes the direction, there's a lot of slow motion in this movie, which I found a little distracting. Flaws and all, I still had a really good time with Skull Island. It's a really fun monster movie.
Should we talk about the after credit scene?
Well, absolutely, we got to talk about the after credit scene.
Basically, Loki and Captain Marvel are sitting in a secret room. The Monarch scientists come out.
There is another.
By the way, the Earth is hollow, and in these hollow cavities live these four monsters.
And they give a slideshow, and there's Godzilla.
There's Mothra, there's King Ghidorah, and there's Rodan.
They're cave paintings, by the way. And then we cut to black, and we hear Godzilla's
But they talk about how, what's the line exactly though? Was it, Kong was not the only king?
For me, this is the best post-credit teaser since Nick Fury showed up in Iron Man. This is setting up Godzilla 2, and it's obviously the end goal here is Godzilla vs. King Kong in 2020. Yes, for years and years, I wanted to see an updated King Kong vs. Godzilla, and I knew it would never happen because of the rights issue, but now it's happening, you guys.
And we've got a shared universe.
Yeah,
and
they're calling it the Monsterverse. That is officially the name.
The Monsterverse.
The Monsterverse. I think Universal's going to be pissed about. I've enjoyed both of these films thus far, so that gives me hope that the rest of the films will be enjoyable as well.
King Kong, you know the name of King Kong. You know the fame of King Kong. 10 times as big as a man.
So before we wrap up, there are some miscellaneous things I want to mention here.
Oh yes, all the boring stuff you always have to do.
There have been a number of animated King Kong things. We mentioned King Kong Escapes was based off of a Wreck-It Boss cartoon show that was called The King Kong Show. This ran from 66 to 69. JD and I looked up a couple clips the other night, and the animation is just terrible. This is something I've been wanting to get my hands on. I haven't been able to find it yet. In 1998, they released a direct-to-video musical cartoon called The Mighty Kong. That is notorious for being Dudley Moore's final screen credit. A musical King Kong? What the fuck is that going to even be like? But unfortunately, I haven't been able to locate a copy of this. A couple years ago, they did a Broadway stage musical about King Kong, which seems to me asking for trouble. Let's make a stage musical where a giant robot gorilla is a main part of the story. There's no way that's going to run perfectly every single night, right? They're going to be mechanical fuck-ups every single time.
Probably.
In 2000, there was a series called Kong, the animated series. This aired on Fox Kids. Do you have any memories about this at all?
Well, I remember the guy used to project his consciousness into the mind of Kong.
Right.
And it would control King Kong.
And there were bad guys that could turn into giant animals that would fight with Kong.
Yeah.
I only watched a couple episodes. I remember the animation being cheap and the whole thing being pretty cheesy. But for some reason, I also remember that Scott McNeil, who was in Gundam Wing and 1,000 other things, did one of the characters on this. I was visiting my 9-year-old nephew, and we were going for Netflix, and he said, hey, let's watch this, Kong, King of the Apes. And they're like, what the hell is this, a new King Kong cartoon? And indeed, there is a relatively new King Kong cartoon, and it's CGI, and I believe it's a French-American co-production. He's fighting robot dinosaurs in it. For an 8 to 9 crowd, it's suitable. There's a hot
You
robot.
liked it.
I wouldn't go so far as to say I liked it, but it was passable. And there is a hot robot girl in it that I did enjoy looking at.
You and your hot robot girls.
Here's the kind of movie you're waiting to see as John Ford and Miriam C. Cooper present Mighty Joe Young, whose sensational exploits will startle you, thrill you, electrify you with hair-raising excitement and suspense. See Mighty Joe Young as he savagely resists capture in his native Africa. See the most fantastic relationship between beast and beauty. A mere girl mastering a primitive giant. See Mighty Joe Young, enraged by Hollywood pranksters, destroy Filmland's swankiest nightclub on a fabulous Sunset Strip.
Mighty Joe Young, the picture that's alive with the most sensational action thrills ever filmed. Mightier than King Kong, Mighty Joe Young.
As been proven in court, you can't copyright the idea of a giant ape. So there have been a number of King Kong ripoffs over the years. This first one is actually really interesting. It is a silent Japanese film from 1938 called King Kong Appears in Edo. If this movie actually exists, no copy has been located. It is believed to have been lost during World War II. And some people think it's a hoax. But if it actually exists, this would have been the very first Japanese giant monster movie. King Kong Appears in Edo, which is medieval Tokyo. And apparently the sets were inspired by the Cabinet of Dr. Caligari, so a very surreal expressionistic set design. I don't think a copy of it's ever going to emerge. I believe it probably was destroyed during the war, but interesting to think about. Obviously, the most well-known spin-off, rip-off, whatever you want to call it, of Kong is Mighty Joe Young from 1949. Same producer, same director. Guy who plays Paul Denham's in it too. Willis O'Brien worked on the effects, and it was Ray Harryhausen's first credit. And that original Mighty Joe Young is a pretty damn good movie, I think.
Yeah.
Instead of having an ape that's killing people, Joe is mostly sympathetic. He gets in trouble, he fights some lions, he causes some chaos, but he's also saving people. He saves a baby from a burning orphanage. And it's worth seeing just for the special effects, and the relationship between the girl and the gorilla is pretty cool. He's big by gorilla standards, but it's still plausible. He's not King Kong big. But then there have been a number of far cheaper knockoffs, the best of which, 1961's Konga, which is a British co-production. It's not a Hammer movie, but it kind of feels like a Hammer King Kong, where Michael Goff is a mad scientist who has a gorilla who's getting gradually bigger. It's sending him off to kill his rivals, and the gorilla suit effects, as far as these things go, are pretty good. Maybe the most infamous King Kong ripoff is from 1976. It's a Korean film. It's called Ape, and I've never seen it, but I have seen the scene where the gorilla flicks off the helicopter.
I want to see the movie just for that.
When it was re-released in theaters, they re-released it as Attack of the Giant Horny Gorilla. You can't make that shit up, man. There was a movie from 1976 called King Kung Fu, where a regular-sized gorilla learns Kung Fu and then climbs the Tower Records building and fights a helicopter. This one's actually supposed to be pretty good as The Mighty Peking Man, and it was produced by the Shaw Brothers, the Hong Kong company that made all the karate movies in the 60s and 70s. The effects are comparable to what Toho was doing at the time, and there's a naked Tarzan girl in it too, if you're into that. Haven't seen it, but supposedly it is the quote-unquote best of the King Kong ripoffs. And then there's a movie from 1976 called Queen Kong, which has a female Kong with an afro who kidnaps a guy and climbs Big Ben. Finally, they remade Mighty Joe Young in 1998 with Charlize Theron and the late, sadly, Bill Paxton. That remake of Mighty Joe Young is completely inferior to the original, but the giant ape effects are pretty good.
Yeah, and I seem to remember liking the relationship between Charlize Theron and that version of Mighty Joe Young a little better, because she seemed more like a friend and less of a bossy little sister.
Sure, there is some CGI that isn't too great, and then they add this silly subplot about this big game hunter who's hunting Joe. They have to give the movie a bad guy. It's pretty forgettable, but it's not terrible, and it does have a pretty fun cameo from Ray Harryhausen and the girl who played Jill in the original.
A land shrouded in mystery, untouched by the hands of time, ruled by a beast, at once majestic and ferocious. But is he friend, or is he foe?
Everyone is roaring about King Kong.
When my nephew, who's never seen a King Kong movie, was going through Netflix and saw that CGI cartoon, he knew who King Kong is. So kids still know what King Kong is somehow. So that's pretty cool.
He's that iconic.
I guess so.
He is kind of like the American monster.
In a way, he is.
I know we have like Dracula and Frankenstein.
Yeah, but all those characters are based off of European novels.
Yeah, this is very much an American monster story.
Just somehow it has permeated all of pop culture to that point. Once again, I gotta thank everybody, all the listeners of the show, Lee and Juan and Jarrett. I saw the emails you sent me. I agree, a rave party would be sweet. If you want to find us, you can contact us at www.facebook.com/thebangersandmashow. I'm on Twitter at LastMonsterKid. Thank you so much for listening, and, you know, JD, I feel like we're kings.
We are kings.
Now let's abduct a blonde girl and climb a tall building.
Or at least she will.
Wah, wah, wah.
With a mountain in the shape of a skull, there lived natives in a village beneath a towering wall. A giant bolted door stood more than half a mile tall, behind which lived the mightiest creature of them all.
King Kong, the white man done you wrong, and so we sing this song to you. Mighty Kong, King Hunga, 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 Kong.
On a puny ship of iron, across a sweltering sea, Robert Armstrong sailed to enslave the greatest of the free.
I'll catch the eighth wonder of the world for all mankind to see.
He even brought a blonde along to keep Kong company.
I'm Tay,
Why do you run away?
Kong only wants to play with you.
So come on, Faye. What do you say?
With gas bombs they captured Kong and brought him back alive. Though very few of Armstrong's crew were destined to survive, till finally on the Broadway stage the mighty Kong arrived, but broke his chains and sex drive.
Up the side of the Empire State, I climbed with my favorite till the planes had gunned me down. The sun set on my day.
'Cause beauty killed the beast at last.
I heard Bob Armstrong say,
And Kong, we all were real impressed. You made a big hit on Broadway.
King Kong, how I can let you go. And so we sing this song to you. Mighty Kong, King Kong. All right, Kong, this is Lieutenant Dan Matthews, Highway